They thought I wouldn't notice the mortgage application filed at 2:13 a.m. or the Shell LLC they used to hide their names. They staged a housewarming in my own home, with a locksmith changing my locks. When my daughter-in-law looked at me and said, "You're not welcome here," she expected tears. She did not expect my smile, or the one phone call that unraveled everything. My name is Evelyn Marlowe. I am 68 years old, and for the last 4 years, I have been a widow. I live in Red Willow, New Hampshire, in the house my husband, Arthur, and I bought the week our son was born. It is my home. Today. The air was crisp for an April afternoon, and I pulled my cardigan tighter as I walked up the bluestone path. The EKG at Dr. Patel's office had been routine, the results as stable as a 68-year-old heart can be expected to be. I was thinking about the grocery list, wondering if I had any time left for the roast chicken I planned to make. That thought evaporated when I saw the balloons. They were tied to my mailbox, a garish collection of silver and gold mylar. They bumped against each other in the breeze, reflecting the pale sunlight. A large banner, strung between the 2 pillars of my porch, read, "Welcome. Homeowners. Homeowners. Plural." A sharp, chemical smell of fresh paint and primer cut through the scent of the azaleas I had just pruned 2 days ago. It was coming from inside my house, before I could fit my key into the lock. The door opened. My daughter-in-law, Tessa Calder, stood in the entryway. She was not dressed for a casual visit. She wore a beige linen suit, the kind of outfit one wears to a closing or a deposition. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe twist, and her smile was a thin, tight line that did not reach her eyes. It was a smile I recognized from stakeholder meetings and forced holiday dinners. "Evelyn," she said, her voice smooth and bright, a salesperson's greeting. "You're early." I looked past her shoulder. My son, Graham, was standing in the foyer, fumbling with the buttons of his suit jacket. He had a black, leather-bound folder tucked under his arm. He would not look at me. "The lender is on their way," Tessa continued, stepping aside not to welcome me, but to manage me. That was when I saw the man. He was kneeling by the door jamb, a large metal toolbox open on my hardwood floors. He was systematically removing the deadbolt assembly from my front door, my lock, the one Arthur installed himself. "We're having the locks upgraded," Tessa offered, as if this were a normal Tuesday. "Security." I stepped inside. The house felt wrong. The air was cold, and my footsteps echoed in a way they should not have. In the living room, I saw why. My wedding photograph, the large one in the silver frame from our 25th anniversary, was gone from the mantel. I found it, moments later, placed on the bottom shelf of the bookcase, behind a stack of magazines. Where it had been, the wall was bare. Tacked onto the drywall were several large architectural drawings. The title block in the corner read, "Proposed Rental Space Optimization." I turned to Tessa. Graham was still hovering by the staircase, studying the pattern on the runner as if it held the secrets of the universe. Tessa walked over to me. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. She tilted her head, a gesture of faux sympathy I had seen her use on Graham many times. She leaned in, the scent of her expensive, sharp perfume filling my space. "Evelyn," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "You're not welcome here." The words hung in the air. The locksmith's drill whirred in the foyer. Graham cleared his throat. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. or ask them what they thought they were doing, or demand they get out of my house. The shock was a cold, clear pane of glass, and on the other side of it, I saw exactly what was happening. I simply looked at my watch. It was 2:37 in the afternoon. I took my phone from my coat pocket. My hands were perfectly steady. I pressed the number 2 on my keypad, a speed dial I had set up weeks ago. I held the phone to my ear as it rang once. A calm, professional voice answered. Harbour and Vale Trust Services. How may we direct your call? This is Evelyn Marlowe, I said, my voice even. I did not look at Tessa. I did not look at my son. I looked at the blueprint tacked to my wall. Please execute the Red Willow contingency. Immediately. There was a pause, and then the voice on the other end, crisp and efficient. Acknowledged. Mrs. Marlowe. Executing now. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Tessa was watching me, her smile faltering for the first time, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She had expected tears. She had expected yelling. She had expected a grieving, confused old woman who would collapse under the weight of this ambush. She did not know me at all. This cold, clear-eyed understanding did not arrive today. It was built over weeks, piece by piece, starting with the small kindnesses that felt wrong. It began 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday. Graham arrived unannounced, which was unusual. He brought a box of organic vegetables, insisting he was worried about my nutrition. He spent an hour changing the filter in my water pitcher and another 2 hours in my study, offering to organize my old file cabinets. He said he wanted to make sure all my papers were in order, in case of an emergency. You never know, Mum, he said, tapping a stack of my old tax returns. It is just good to be prepared. Tessa came over for dinner that Friday. She brought a gluten-free casserole that tasted like sawdust and talked about elder safety. She spoke in that concerned, slightly too loud voice people use when they believe you are deaf or senile. We just worry. Evelyn, she said, placing her manicured hand on my arm. What if you fell? We would need to be able to access your accounts, just to pay your bills while you recovered. A limited power of attorney would be so helpful. Just for emergencies. I smiled and said I would think about it. I watched her glance at Graham. A quick, sharp look. Later that night, as I was marking a doctor's appointment on my wall calendar, I saw a scrap of paper she had left near the phone. A cocktail napkin from a downtown bar. Someone had scribbled a name on it. Starlane Capital. I picked up my pencil and wrote in the margin for March 22nd, Tessa, Starlane Capital Bank. The following week, the real signals began. I woke up one night just after 2 a.m, a terrible crick in my neck from dozing in the armchair. My phone was lit up. A missed call, time-stamped 2:13 a.m, from a number I did not recognize. I called it back. A recorded message answered, "You have reached a non-working number at Starlane Capital." I hung up. 2 days later. My mail stopped. Not all of it, of course. The junk mail, the catalogues, the local supermarket flyers, those still arrived. But the important things vanished. My bank statement, the dividend check from Arthur's old investments, the explanation of benefits from my heart specialist. My mailbox, usually full, was suddenly empty by noon. Someone, I realized, must have filed a change of address form. They were intercepting my financial life. I did not mention it to Graham. Instead, I started watching. A new neighbour appeared. I never saw them move in. but a dark grey SUV began parking 3 houses down, always present during the hours the mail carrier made her rounds. When a FedEx truck stopped at my curb, the SUV's doors would open, and a man in a baseball cap would get out, busy with his phone, watching the delivery. That Saturday, I went to Graham and Tessa's house for my grandson's birthday. While Tessa was distracted by the caterer, I went to Graham's home office, intending to print a recipe. The printer, which I had used a month before, was suddenly disconnected from the Wi-Fi. I jiggled the mouse, waking the computer. Tessa had left the scanner lid open. On the glass was a document, face down. A faint blue ink blot stained the corner of the scanner bed. She had forgotten to put the cap back on her fountain pen. When I lifted the lid, I saw the form. It was a template for a general power of attorney, printed from a legal website. My name, Evelyn Marlowe, was typed neatly in the principal field, but the first true alarm bell had rung even before that. It had been Tessa, asking about things that were not hers. "Evelyn?" she had asked, stirring her coffee in my kitchen. "Where do you keep the key to your safe deposit box? Graham and I were thinking we should make digital copies of all the old family photos, just to preserve them." I told her I had lost the key years ago. She smiled, but her eyes tightened. That night, I went to the bank. I did not take anything out. I simply sat in the cold, sterile vault room and photographed every document in that box with my phone. The original deed to my house, Arthur's discharge papers, my will. When I got home, I went to my closet. I took Arthur's old wool peacoat from the back. I carefully unstitched the lining near the collar, slipped the original, folded copy of my will inside, and sewed the seam back up. The copy I left in the file cabinet was just that, a copy. I am not a fool. I am not a frail, confused old woman. I am my husband's widow, and I am my son's mother. But I am also the person who balanced the books for this family for 45 years. They mistook my grief for weakness. They mistook my silence for consent. They thought I was the prey. They never realized I was the one setting the trap. The day I photographed my will, I did not go straight home. I drove to the Northbridge Civic Trust. I had managed their endowment fund for 20 years before I retired, and I still knew the back routes into the parking garage. Arthur Penn, the Trust's former legal counsel, was waiting for me. He has been officially retired for 5 years, but he still keeps consulting hours, which mostly means he uses the good coffee machine and reads the Wall Street Journal in an office that does not smell of his wife's potpourri. He is a precise, quiet man who detests melodrama. He is the only person I trust. I did not cry or waste time. I sat opposite his large mahogany desk and placed my phone on the blotter, displaying the photo of the blank POA form I found on Graham's scanner. I told him about the organic vegetables, the mail, the Star Lane Capital napkin, and Tessa's sudden interest in my safe deposit box. He listened without interruption, his fingers steepled. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "Evelyn," he said, his voice as dry as old paper. "You will not sign anything. Not a dinner receipt, not a delivery confirmation, not a get-well card. If they hand you a pen, you put your hands in your pockets." "I have not signed anything yet," I said. "They will try," he said. "That POA form is their first attempt. So, we act first. We will file a revocation. A revocation for a document I never signed." "Precisely," Arthur said. He picked up his own phone. "We file a legally recorded revocation of any and all powers of attorney, real or implied, naming Graham Marlowe or Tessa Calder. It creates a public, searchable document that preemptively invalidates their forgery. It is a firewall. His assistant, a woman I had hired 15 years ago, brought in the form. I signed it with my full, clear signature, and she left immediately to file it with the county clerk. Next, Arthur said, turning to his computer. The house. They are not doing this for your checking account. They want the asset, the equity. He navigated to the Red Willow County Register of Deeds website. They have an alert system. It costs $10 a month. You link it to your parcel ID. The instant any document, a lien, a transfer, a quitclaim is submitted bearing your address, you get a text message. I entered my credit card information and linked my phone. We sat in silence for a minute. Now we wait for them to hit the tripwire, he said. It took 2 days. I was weeding the hydrangeas when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was not a call. It was a short, automated text from the county database. Alert provisional filing update submitted for parcel ID 4A221. Entity Calder Family Holdings, LLC. Calder. Tessa's maiden name. I called Arthur and read him the message. A shell company, he said immediately. It is a standard tactic. They move the title into an anonymous LLC to obscure the chain of ownership. It makes it harder to claw back. They are preparing to borrow against the house. Evelyn. Or sell it outright. They are moving faster than I thought. If they were applying for a loan, they would be checking my financial health. That night, I paid for an expedited credit monitoring service. The report was in my inbox an hour later. There it was. A hard inquiry, dated March 27th, from Star Lane Capital. They had not pulled Graham's credit, or Tessa's. They had pulled mine. They were applying for a mortgage as me. The next evening, Tessa called. Her voice was bright and sticky with false concern. Evelyn, I found the most wonderful new optometrist. I know you said your reading glasses were bothering you. I booked you an appointment for tomorrow. Just a quick eyesight check. Graham and I can drive you. I held the phone steady. My other hand pressed the record button on a small digital recorder Arthur had insisted I buy. How thoughtful. Tessa. Where is the office? It is downtown, very efficient. They can get you in and out. And a notary is available there, I suppose, I asked, keeping my voice mild. There was a sharp, cold silence. I am sure they are, she stammered. For any insurance paperwork. It is just for convenience. I will pass, I said. My cardiologist already referred me to a specialist. I hung up. Arthur confirmed my suspicion. It was an ambush. Get the target into a quasi-medical office, slip a quitclaim deed or a HELOC application into a stack of insurance forms, and have a notary conveniently on hand. They had a plan. I accelerated mine. They would need access to the house, perhaps for an appraiser, or for the locksmith I now expected. The next morning, I called a locksmith of my own. I did not change the front door. That would be too obvious. I had him replace the high-security deadbolt on the side door, the one leading from the kitchen to the garage. The new key went on a chain, and I wore it under my sweater. My last step was the most crucial. I bought a new doorbell camera online, a model that looked like a simple, modern bell. I installed it myself that afternoon, while the dark grey SUV, my mysterious neighbour, sat parked 3 houses down. I subscribed to the premium cloud storage plan, registering the account under my mother's maiden name. I set the motion sensitivity to its highest level. I had my firewall with the revocation. I had my tripwire with the county alerts. I had my new lock. And I had my silent witness on the porch. I had everything. Except the answer to the one question that kept me staring at the ceiling at night. To pull my credit. To file for a loan. To create a shell LLC and attempt a transfer. They needed my signature on documents that had to be notarized. I knew I had not signed them. So who did? After my failed eye exam, their strategy shifted. Graham called 2 days later, his voice strained with artificial cheer. He wanted to take me to lunch, to clear the air. He suggested the Maple Fork, a place we used to go for family birthdays. He was hoping the nostalgia would soften me. I agreed. I wore a silk blouse, and in the breast pocket, I clipped a new pen Arthur Penn had given me. It was a heavy, expensive-looking fountain pen. It was also a high-definition video recorder. The restaurant was half empty. Tessa was already there, seated in a booth, tapping at her phone. She had not come for nostalgia. She had come for business. "Evelyn, so glad you could make it," she said, giving me that tight, beige smile. Graham just nodded and fussed with his napkin. Before the waiter had even brought water, Tessa launched in. "Graham and I have been doing a lot of thinking about the future, about asset protection." She used those words. Asset protection and tax optimization, like shields. She spoke about the current market volatility and the burden of a large property on a single person. She was describing my home as if it were a failing stock, not the place Graham took his first steps. I let her talk, sipping my water. I kept my gaze level. "The planning you are describing sounds very complex, Tessa," I said, my voice calm. Arthur was always meticulous about such things. His signature, as you know, was beautifully consistent. I keep all his old ledgers. My own signature, of course, is just as recorded. With the bank, with the trust, with the county. A very specific, verifiable baseline. Tessa's smile twitched. I had just reminded her that my signature was a known, provable entity. I turned to my son. "Graham, I am a simple woman. This talk of optimization is confusing. Just tell me plainly, how many of my bedrooms are you planning to sell?" Graham choked on his water. He coughed, his face turning red. "Mum, no. We would never. It is not selling. It is not selling." "Then what is it, dear?" "It is leveraging," he stammered, looking at Tessa for help. "We were just looking at a HELOC, just a line of credit. To make some updates, renovations, it would increase the value." "A home equity line of credit," I said, nodding slowly. "You would borrow against my house, to renovate my house." "Exactly," he said, grasping at the straw. Tessa cut him off. Her eyes were like ice. "What Graham means is that we are exploring options to secure the family's legacy. We have drawn up a simple letter of intent. Evelyn. It just outlines our commitment to managing the property on your behalf." She slid a folded document across the table. It was not a legal filing. It was vague, full of comforting words like stewardship and familial agreement. It was a document designed to be agreed to through silence. A piece of paper she could later wave at a lawyer and say, "She knew all about it." I unfolded it, my hand steady. The camera in my pen was recording her face, the document, Graham's nervous energy. "This looks very professional." "Tessa," I said. "It is the original. Is it not? I would not want to get any food on it. I pushed it back gently. Could you have the waiter make me a copy? I will keep the copy. You should hold on to the original. It is safer with you. She was visibly pleased. She thought I was accepting it. She signaled the waiter. As she shifted in the booth to hand the paper over, her purse, which had been balanced precariously on the seat, tipped. Her wallet fell open onto the cushion. A flurry of receipts and cards spilled out. I helped her gather them. A dry cleaning ticket, a credit card, and a small, square receipt from a thermal printer. Oh, thank you, she said, snatching them, but I had already read it. Vesper Notary and Filing, one consultation service. I tucked the knowledge away. When the waiter returned with the copy, I folded it and placed it in my own purse. The rest of the meal was a blur of small talk. I ate my salmon. I asked Graham about his son. On the drive home, I did not go straight back to my house. I pulled over onto a quiet side street with a good signal. My first call was to the Red Willow County Register of Deeds. I did not ask for Arthur. I spoke directly to the clerk. My name is Evelyn Marlowe. I am the sole owner of parcel ID 04A221. I need to place an immediate dispute flag on this property. I have reason to believe fraudulent transfer documents may be filed. The clerk was efficient. She took my information, confirmed my identity with questions only I could answer, and placed the flag. Any filing against my home would now be frozen, pending a hearing. My second stop was the post office. I wrote a short, clear letter to the Chief Compliance Officer at Starlane Capital. To whom it may concern, it read, I am Evelyn Marlowe. It has come to my attention that you may be processing a loan application against my property. Any such application, filed by any party other than myself, is fraudulent. Any transaction, signature, or agreement that does not include my verified physical presence in your office should be considered an act of identity theft. I sent it via certified mail. Return receipt requested. When I got home, I looked at the dark grey SUV parked in its usual spot. They thought they were preparing an ambush. They did not know I had already mined the road. I was no longer a target. I was a trap, waiting to be sprung. The dispute flag I filed was a dam. Tessa's fraudulent filing was the flood. It took less than 24 hours for the two to collide. My phone buzzed as I was washing my morning coffee cup. A text message from the county alert system. It was no longer a provisional filing. It was an active attempt. Alert quitclaim deed submitted by Calder Family Holdings, LLC, status pending confirmation. Action frozen per dispute. Flag 44A. They had done it. They had filed the forged document to steal my house. I called Arthur Penn. They hit the wire, I said. His voice was clipped. All business. I am filing for an emergency temporary restraining order. We are going to the district court. The flag freezes the clerk's office, but the TRO freezes them. It stops Starlane Capital. It stops any attempt to sell, transfer, or encumber the property. Meet me at Harbour and Vale in 1 hour. Harbour and Vale Trust Services was not a bank. It was an old, quiet firm that handled the assets of New Hampshire's old, quiet families. They were the entity I had called from my foyer. Arthur had already arranged the paperwork. The document they placed before me was not a will. It was a conditional trust, a spring-loaded trap. It stated that I, Evelyn Marlowe, placed my property into the trust. But it contained a unique clause. If any competing deed or claim was filed against the property by any entity, The trust would automatically and immediately execute a deed reversion, slamming the title back into my individual name, voiding all other claims. It was a legal kill switch. If they file, it reverts. If they file again, it reverts again. The trust officer explained, "They cannot outrun it. You are the only one who can release it." I signed my name. The ink was barely dry when I went to my next stop. The evidence. I needed an alibi for my own signature. I went to my study and pulled out my husband's old financial ledgers, dated 10 years ago. I found a birthday card I signed last May. I found my passport. I photographed the signatures, showing the clear, consistent loop of my E. Then, I took the appointment summary from my visit to Dr. Patel, my cardiologist. It was dated April 4th, the same day. I would soon learn that Evelyn Marlowe had supposedly visited Vesper Notary and Filing. I photographed that, too. I was in a heart clinic while I was allegedly signing away my home. The final piece of the puzzle came from my son's carelessness. Graham, in his anxiety, had become sloppy. He and Tessa apparently shared a cloud account, and her email was synced to his laptop. He had left it open on my kitchen counter during one of his brief, guilt-ridden check-in visits, and a notification had popped up. It was an email sent to Tessa at 2:13 in the morning. The sender was Starlane Capital. The subject line was, "Clear to close, need principal's ID scan." I did not have to open it. The subject line was the entire confession. They had cleared the loan. All they needed was a copy of my driver's license to finalize the theft. I took my evidence binder and drove to Vesper Notary and Filing. It was a small, dusty office over a sandwich shop. A nervous-looking man in a wrinkled shirt sat behind the desk. I placed my driver's license on his desk. "My name is Evelyn Marlowe." He turned pale. "I have a copy of a quitclaim deed filed with the county," I said, my voice quiet. "It bears your seal. It claims I signed it in your presence on April 4th. I did not." He started to stammer, looking at the door. I do not recall." "Perhaps this will help," I said, sliding the photo of my cardiology report across the desk. On April 4th, I was at the New England Heart Clinic from 9 a.m. until noon. But someone was here, wasn't she? The man crumpled. He knew what kind of trouble he was in. He spoke in a rush, his voice trembling. "A woman came in. She was wearing a hat, sunglasses, and a full medical face mask. She would not speak. The son, your son, Graham, he was with her. He did all the talking." "Go on," I said. "He said it was his mother. He said she had laryngitis and was very frail. He said she was hard of hearing. He held her hand and pointed where she needed to sign. I asked for ID. He handed me the driver's license. The picture. It looked like her, with the hat on. I took his word for it. He was the son? You notarized a document for someone in a mask, who never spoke, based on the word of a third party. I said. It was not a question. He just nodded, his eyes shut. He said she speaks very little. I took my license and my photo. You will need to write that down exactly as you told it to me. It is called an affidavit. A lawyer will be here this afternoon to take your statement. I suggest you cooperate. I walked out into the sunlight. My phone was ringing. It was Arthur. The judge granted the TRO, he said. Every asset is frozen. And he read my brief on the forged notary. He is furious. He is not waiting. The hearing is set for this Friday. He called it a matter of urgent public integrity. They have 2 days. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the living room, in Arthur's old armchair. I looked at the photograph of him on the mantel, the real one, the one Tessa had tried to hide. I am not going to let them. Arthur, I whispered to the man in the silver frame. I will not sign away what we built, not one brick. Graham arrived alone, the evening before the hearing. He used his old key, not bothering to knock. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, and the sound of the deadbolt turning made my shoulders seize. He stood in the doorway, looking pale and sleep-deprived. He was still wearing the suit from yesterday's housewarming, though the tie was gone and his collar was undone. "Mum," he said, his voice husky. "We need to talk. This has all gone too far." "Has it?" I asked, turning to face him. I set the dish rag down. "I just wanted to help," he said, the words rushing out. "You are here all alone. The house is too big. Tessa just thinks about planning, about the future. We were just trying to help." "Help," I repeated. It was not a question. "You were helping when you hired a locksmith to change my locks." "That was just for security, Tessa." "Tessa," I interrupted, "is very efficient." I walked past him to the dining room table, where I had placed a single piece of paper. It was a printout of the email notification I had seen on his laptop, the one from Starlane Capital, the one time-stamped 2:13 a.m. I pushed it toward him. "Were you helping me at 2 in the morning? Graham? When you were trying to get a loan in my name? Were you helping me when you asked for a scan of my ID?" He stared at the paper. The blood drained from his face. He knew exactly what it was. I did not." "You did not what?" "Graham. Did not write it. Did not know, stop lying. It is insulting." Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Not my new video doorbell, but the old, chiming one. I looked past Graham, through the sidelight. I could see Tessa on the porch, and she was not alone. There was a man with her, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Graham, trapped, went to open the door. Tessa swept in, the man following closely. She did not look at me. She looked at the email on the table and then at Graham, her eyes flashing with fury. "Tessa," I said, "and friend." "This is Merritt Doyle," Tessa said. "All business. He is our family counsel." Mr. Doyle stepped forward. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore an expensive suit. He radiated a kind of calm, corporate authority. He was not a litigator. He was a fixer. "Mrs. Marlowe," he said, his voice a smooth baritone. "It is a pleasure. I am here to help us resolve this unfortunate misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I said. "That is what you are calling it." "These family situations are always emotionally complex," Doyle continued, smiling a patronizing smile. "Tessa and Graham are simply concerned for your welfare. We think the best path forward is to discuss a minor adjustment to the residency agreement." I held up one hand. "Excuse me. Mr. Doyle. Residency agreement. On my property." I took my phone from my pocket. "You seem to be operating under a false assumption." I dialed the after-hours number for the Red Willow County Clerk's office, one Arthur had given me. I pressed the speakerphone button. A recorded voice answered. "You have reached the Red Willow County Register of Deeds. Our offices are currently closed. For automated information on flagged properties, please press 1. Doyle's smile faltered. I pressed 1. Please enter the parcel ID, the voice instructed. I typed in the number. ZOP4E221. There was a click. Parcel ID 04A221, registered to Evelyn Marlowe. The voice announced clearly in the quiet room. This property is under an active dispute flag, 44A, and an active temporary restraining order, file number 22C819. All transactions are stayed. No change in residency, title, or encumbrance is permitted pending a full judicial hearing. I disconnected the call. The silence in the room was heavy. Merritt Doyle was no longer smiling. He was looking at Tessa. The judge cannot do that without a hearing. Tessa stammered, her corporate poise cracking. He can when presented with prima facie evidence of fraud, I said calmly. Like, for instance, a notarized forgery. This is ridiculous, Tessa snapped. This is our asset. We have an appraiser coming tomorrow at 3 o'clock. She froze. The words just hung in the air. Graham closed his eyes. Doyle let out a short, sharp sigh. I looked at Tessa. An appraiser. Why are you appraising my furniture? Tessa. Or are you appraising my house? The house you just tried to file a fraudulent deed on. You live here alone. Graham suddenly shouted, his voice cracking with a mixture of guilt and rage. It is an empty house. We are your family. You could let us. You could. He stopped, his mouth open. He had just confessed. You could let us. Let us have it. I did not yell. I did not need to. I picked up my phone again and opened my photo album. I tapped the video file from my doorbell camera, the one from April 4th. I turned the screen toward them. The video was clear. It showed my front porch. It showed a woman, short, wearing a blue beanie pulled down low, sunglasses, and a medical face mask. It showed my son, Graham, holding her elbow, guiding her to the door. It showed him using his key to let her in, just minutes before the mobile notary from Vesper arrived in his own car. Who is this? Graham. I asked, my voice very quiet. Is this me? Because I was at my cardiologist's office. This woman. She is wearing Tessa's trench coat, and that is Tessa's hat. Is it not the one you wore to the farmer's market last week? Tessa was the colour of chalk. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing. She had been the one. She had been the imposter in the mask. Merritt Doyle snapped his briefcase shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. Tessa, he said, his voice low and sharp. We are leaving now. We will make no further statements. You cannot. Tessa began. We are leaving, he repeated, grabbing her arm. He pulled her toward the door. Graham stood rooted, staring at the phone in my hand, his face a mask of shame. Graham, Doyle barked. Graham turned, stumbling, and followed them out the door. I watched them go. I locked the deadbolt behind them. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was not asset protection. It was a conspiracy. It was a cold, deliberate plan to steal my home. And I had just watched it fall to pieces on my dining room table. The silence in my house after they left was heavy. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a field headquarters after a skirmish, preparing for the main battle. Arthur Penn called me at 10 o'clock that night. His voice was cold steel. Evelyn, he said. The confrontation was necessary. It established their intent in front of a witness. But the hearing is Friday. We are not going in to defend. We are going in to dissect. I'm bringing in a forensic CPA. His name was Mr. Jacoby, a quiet man who seemed to prefer numbers to people. He did not care about the family drama. He only cared about the data trail. He worked through the night, and by dawn, he had unraveled Tessa's entire scheme. The data was colder than her voice. The entity that filed the quitclaim deed, Calder Family Holdings, LLC, was exactly what Arthur suspected a shell. But Jacoby went deeper. That LLC was, in fact, wholly owned by a second LLC, a holding company registered in Delaware called Victoria and Bray Holdings. My breath caught. Victoria and Bray. The names of my grandchildren. She had used her own children's names to create an anonymous shield for her theft. The sole managing member and authorized signatory listed on the Delaware filing for Victoria and Bray Holdings was Tessa Calder. The link was direct and absolute. Jacoby then used the power of the TRO to pull the complete HELOC application package from Starlane Capital. The amount was for $400,000. The collateral listed in Section 2A was my property. The purpose of the loan, stated in the underwriting notes, was not home renovation. It was acquisition of secondary property. He found the purchase and sale agreement. Tessa was in the final stages of buying a new, glass-walled condominium at Harbour Quay, the expensive new development overlooking the Sound. The buyer listed on the agreement was not Tessa Calder. It was Victoria and Bray Holdings, LLC. They were stealing my equity to buy themselves a waterfront condo. While Jacoby traced the money, Arthur's legal team, now armed with subpoenas, moved on the communications. They retrieved the email chain between Tessa, her lawyer Merritt Doyle, and the increasingly nervous loan officer at Starlane. The timeline was damning. We found an email from Merritt Doyle to Tessa, sent 2 weeks ago, advising her that they needed to conclude the notarization phase quickly. He specifically mentioned the standard 10-day window between a deed filing and it appearing in the public-facing county system. He was warning her that if I had any kind of alert set up, that 10-day gap was her only chance. They knew they were committing fraud, and they were racing the clock. The evidence piled up, piece by chilling piece. Arthur found the realtor who had been present at my house for the housewarming ambush. That realtor had already submitted a preliminary occupancy statement to Starlane Capital to help clear the loan. The document, which Arthur sent to my email, stated, "Current principal, E. Marlowe, will transition to assisted living by the end of the quarter due to declining health. Property will be vacant and ready for renovation by May 1st. I was reading my own financial obituary, written by my daughter-in-law, Arthur's private investigator. Meanwhile, had canvassed the businesses on the street near Vesper Notary, a dry cleaner's security camera pointing toward the street, captured the dark grey SUV I had seen. The footage showed it parking 2 blocks away from the notary's office. It showed a figure in Tessa's trench coat, a blue beanie, and a mask, the fake Evelyn, getting out. An hour later, it showed the same figure getting back in, tossing the beanie into the back seat, and the SUV driving away. The mail? I had almost forgotten the mail. We subpoenaed Tessa's phone records. We found it a 12-minute call to the United States Postal Service's automated line, made the day after she first suggested the power of attorney. She had used my social security number and date of birth, which, of course, She knew to redirect all mail from the IRS and the county assessor to a new P.O. box she had rented at a shipping center. She was stealing my tax documents. The final cut came from Mr. Jacoby, just hours before the hearing. "Mrs. Marlowe," he said over the phone, "you gave your son a supplementary credit card on your primary account, correct?" "Yes," I said. "Years ago, for emergencies." "He used it," Jacoby said, 4 days ago. "A charge for $5,000, payable to Calder Design Group, Tessa's defunct interior design company." The memo line on the charge was renovation retainer. They had not even waited for the loan. They had already started spending my money. Arthur Penn took all of it, the CPA's flowchart of the LLCs, the affidavit from the terrified notary, the screenshot of the 2:13 a.m. email, the fraudulent occupancy statement, the video of the fake Evelyn, the postal service records, and the credit card charge. He filed it all with the court under a single cover sheet. We were no longer just defending against a fraudulent deed. We were now the plaintiffs in a suit alleging conspiracy, identity theft, and aggravated fraud. The hearing, scheduled for Friday, which Tessa and Graham thought was a simple 15-minute review of a temporary order, had just become a full-throated trial. The courtroom was small, stuffy, and panelled in wood that had absorbed decades of quiet desperation. Tessa and Graham sat at the respondents' table, stiff as statues. Their lawyer, Merritt Doyle, was arranging papers, but his usual smoothness was gone. He looked stressed. I sat with Arthur Penn, and Mr. Jacoby sat behind us, his files stacked neatly. Judge Eleanor Cates took the bench, adjusted her microphone, and put on a pair of silver-rimmed glasses. Her grey hair was severe, but her eyes were the sharpest thing in the room. "We are here," she began, her voice cutting through the silence, "on the matter of Marlowe versus Marlowe and Calder." Merritt Doyle immediately rose. "Your Honour, if I may, my clients believe this is fundamentally a family matter, a misunderstanding about future planning. We would request these proceedings be stayed and that the parties be ordered into private, family mediation." Judge Cates looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Doyle," I read Mr. Penn's entire filing, including the attached exhibits. "I have seen the affidavit from the notary public and the evidence of a forged quitclaim deed. This is not a family misunderstanding. This is a property proceeding with significant criminal implications. This court will not order mediation for fraud. You will sit down." Doyle sat, his face flushing. "Mr. Penn?" the judge said. "Proceed." Arthur did not grandstand. He was a creature of fact. "Your Honour, the facts are simple and undisputed. We have provided them. I merely wish to have Mr. Jacoby clarify the financial timeline, as it establishes intent." Mr. Jacoby was sworn in. He placed a single flowchart on the projector. "Your Honour, the timeline is clear. The defendants established Calder Family Holdings, LLC, which was itself owned by Victoria and Bray Holdings, a Delaware entity controlled by Mrs. Calder. On April 4th, they filed the fraudulent quitclaim, attempting to move the plaintiff's property into that LLC. Simultaneously, they used the plaintiff's credit and forged signature to apply for a $400,000 HELOC via Starlane Capital. He pointed to the end of the chart. Those funds were not intended for renovation. They were to be wired, at closing, as the down payment on a condominium at Harbour Quay, a property Victoria and Bray Holdings was already in escrow on. The intent was to steal the plaintiff's equity to finance the defendant's purchase. The judge stared at the chart. This is not a plan. This is a blueprint for a theft. Furthermore, Arthur continued, we have the sworn testimony of the notary from Vesper filing. He admits he did not verify the signer's identity. His own logbook, which he has provided, states, and I quote, Son, G. Marlowe, confirmed identity of principal. Principal nonverbal. He notarized a document for a woman in a mask on the word of an interested party. Graham sank lower in his chair, his face in his hands. Finally, Arthur said, the timeline of the filings is critical. The Red Willow County Clerk has confirmed that my client's dispute flag, number 44A, was recorded at 9:04 a.m. on April 5th. The defendant's fraudulent deed was not submitted until 11:32 a.m. Our flag was active first. Their filing was dead on arrival. Starlane Capital has also confirmed they received my client's certified letter warning of fraud before any closing was scheduled. Judge Cates took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose, then looked directly at Tessa. Tessa stared back, defiant. The evidence before me is not just compelling, the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. It is overwhelming. The attempt to defraud this court, the county, and the plaintiff is blatant. She picked up her pen and began signing a multi-page document. This court hereby issues an emergency order. The temporary restraining order is made preliminary. The quitclaim deed filed by Calder Family Holdings, LLC, is declared void ab initio. It never was. All related transactions, including the pending HELOC application, are voided. The status of the property at parcel ID ERU4A221 is reverted to the status quo ante, as it was before these actions. It is, and remains, the sole property of Evelyn Marlowe. She signed the last page with a sharp stroke. Arthur stood one last time. Your Honour, a final petition. Given the brazenness of this attempt, we believe the defendants remain a clear and present threat to Mrs. Marlowe's title. We request the court's explicit permission for an emergency action to allow Mrs. Marlowe to immediately transfer the property title into her sole name via the prearranged conditional trust at Harbour and Vale, thereby closing all legal loopholes and securing the asset against any further attempts at fraud. Merritt Doyle jumped up. Your Honour, that is prejudicial. Judge Cates held up a hand. Mr. Doyle, your clients created this prejudice. The request is reasonable. It is granted. So long as the transfer meets the conditions of a secure trust and proper notice is served, you may proceed. Mr. Penn. She struck the gavel. This hearing is adjourned. I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's office. It was done. I had won. But as I watched Tessa and her lawyer huddle, their expressions were not of defeat. They were of fury. Merritt Doyle was speaking rapidly. Tessa's eyes were fixed on me. I knew what she was thinking. The judge's order was immediate. But the recording of my new protective deed with Harbour and Vale would still take hours, perhaps until the next business day, to be officially filed. She had lost the legal war. She had one move left. She was going to try and seize the property physically, publicly, to create a new fact of occupancy before my final paperwork was stamped. The housewarming I had walked into it was not a celebration. It was her last, desperate, chaotic move in a game she had already lost. I left the courthouse. The judge's words, "It is granted," ringing like a steel bell in the air. Arthur drove me home. He had already been on the phone with Harbour and Vale Trust Services. They are filing the judge's order electronically right now, he said, navigating the afternoon traffic. It is called an e-recording. It puts the county on immediate notice. But they need your wet signature on the finalized deed reversion to make it ironclad. A representative is meeting us at your house. Do not, under any circumstances, leave the property once you are there. He understood Tessa. She had lost the legal battle, but she was arrogant. She would not believe she could lose. She would try to win the physical one. When we turned onto my street, I saw he was right. My quiet, tree-lined road was choked with vehicles. There were 2 large white vans from Red Willow Construction, a sedan with a Calber Realty logo on the side, and several other expensive cars I did not recognize. And the balloons were still there. Tied to my railing, "Welcome, homeowners." She did not even go home, I murmured. She must have come straight from the courthouse to enact this final, desperate piece of theatre. I walked up my own path, Arthur beside me. The front door was propped wide open. Inside, my house was full of strangers. It was a party. Or rather, it was staged to look like one. Men in suits stood in my living room, sipping champagne from plastic flutes. Men with clipboards were measuring my walls. I saw one of them point to the fireplace. Tessa was the center of it all, dressed in her beige suit, her face flushed with a manic energy. Graham stood near the staircase, his face ashen. He looked ill. Taped to the archway of my kitchen, a large poster was displayed. It was a glossy rendering of my kitchen, destroyed and replaced. The title at the top read, Project Calder Q4 Conversion. Tessa saw me. The chatter in the room died. Everyone turned. I saw several of the realtors and contractors raise their phones, not quite in the air, but angled at us. They sensed the conflict. They were recording. Tessa walked toward me, a fixed, brittle smile on her face. She stopped just a few feet away. Graham moved to her side, his eyes pleading. "Tessa," he whispered, gesturing to the phones. "Don't. Not in front of them." She ignored him. She looked at me, and she pitched her voice low, a confidential, pitying tone intended for the audience. "Evelyn?" she said, shaking her head sadly. I thought my lawyer made it clear. "You're not welcome here." As if summoned, the locksmith from that morning, the one who had tried to drill out my locks, stepped forward. He held up a clipboard. "Ma'am," he said to Tessa, "I have the work order right here, ready to change the remaining cause." He was here to lock me out. This was her final move to use a crowd of witnesses and a paid workman to establish, by force, that she was in possession of the house. Tessa's eyes were triumphant. "This is our house," she said, loud enough for all the phones to hear. "Wrong," I said. My voice was quiet, and the room fell completely silent. "This is not your house." I looked past her, at the men with the phones. "And all of you, you are not guests. You are witnesses to a criminal act. This is not a renovation project. This is about to be evidence." Graham winced. One of the realtors lowered his phone. My hands did not shake. I reached into the large leather tote bag Arthur was carrying and removed a single 9x12 envelope of thick, cream-coloured cardstock. It was embossed with the seal of Harbour and Vale Trust Services. I did not have to open it. I simply held it. Tessa stared at the envelope. She was a creature of finance. She recognized the branding of old money, of power she could not touch. "What is that?" she snapped, "This," I said, "is the judge's order." Just then, my phone, held tightly in my other hand, vibrated. I glanced at the screen. It was the text alert from Harbour and Vale. E-recording confirmed. File 22C819, received by Red Willow County, awaiting physical signatory execution. The digital firewall was in place. The judge's order was logged. The only thing left, the final key in the final lock, was my signature. Tessa looked at the envelope in my hand. She looked at the locksmith. She looked at Graham. She had built her entire plan on a foundation of forged paper. She had no idea I was about to defeat her with a single, authentic page. As the silence in my living room stretched, thin and sharp as a wire, a woman in a severe dark blue suit stepped through the open door. She carried a slim leather briefcase and ignored everyone: the realtors, the locksmith, Graham, and Tessa. Her focus was entirely on me. "Mrs. Marlowe," she said, her voice clear and professional, cutting through the tension. "I am Julia Vinson from Harbour and Vale Trust Services. I have the document you are expecting. As per the emergency order granted by Judge Cates, it requires your immediate signature to execute." She opened her briefcase on my foyer table, a space Tessa had, hours earlier, covered in architectural blueprints. She placed a single, heavy vellum document in the center and uncapped a pen. This was it. The final, physical key. In front of them, all in front of the men recording on their phones. In front of the locksmith waiting to change my locks. In front of my son, who looked like a hollowed-out shell. And in front of my daughter-in-law, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. I took the pen. My hand, which had trembled earlier that day, was now perfectly steady. I signed my name, Evelyn Marlowe, on the signature line. The ink was dark and definitive. Julia Vinson, the trust representative, did not retrieve the document. Instead, she tapped her phone, which was connected to a small, portable speaker on her briefcase. "Executing," she said. A clear, slightly synthesized voice filled my home. "E-filing received and executed by Red Willow County, File 22C819, owner of record Evelyn Marlowe. All third-party claims are stayed. Title is clear." "No," Tessa shrieked. It was not a word. It was a tearing sound, raw and desperate. "That is not valid. It is not filed. The clerk's office is closed. You cannot. That is not legal. It is perfectly legal." Arthur Penn's voice came from just behind me. He had been standing by the door, quiet as a shadow, waiting for this exact moment. He stepped forward, holding his own copy of the judge's order, which he held up not for Tessa, but for the realtors. The court authorized an immediate e-filing and wet signature execution, making it valid the instant Mrs. Marlowe signed it. Arthur announced, his voice carrying through the room. "And you," he said, motioning to the crowd, "are all material witnesses. You have just documented my client being forced to secure her home against a fraudulent claim, an act of overt, willful theft that you have all captured on your phones." As if summoned by the word fraud, a high-pitched electronic chime cut through the air. Graham's phone, held loosely in his shaking hand, lit up. The screen was bright in the dimming afternoon light, an email preview. I could read the sender from where I stood, Star Lane Capital Compliance. The subject line was just as clear. Urgent Loan File 889G Suspended Fraud Investigation. Graham made a small, suffocating sound, like a man being punched in the stomach. He stumbled back, his legs buckling. and he slumped against the newel post, staring at the screen. The sound of that email was the sound of the final trap door falling open beneath him. The play was over. The locksmith, his face pale, was the first to move. He quietly began packing his tools, avoiding Tessa's furious gaze. The realtors, their faces a mixture of shock and professional embarrassment, snapped their notebooks shut and pocketed their phones. "I believe we are done here," one of them muttered to another. The contractors filed out, unplugging their measuring equipment. Within 2 minutes, the house was empty. The sudden silence was deafening. It was just me, Arthur, Graham, and Tessa. I turned and looked at the garish silver banner still hanging on my porch. "Welcome, homeowners." I turned back to Tessa. "You can leave the sign," I said, my voice quiet. "I am the homeowner." She just stared at me, her chest heaving, her face a mask of ugly disbelief. She had nothing left. No lies, no documents, no crowd, no leverage. She took a half step back, bumping into the wall she had intended to tear down. I took a half step forward, reclaiming the space. My voice was calm and steady, and it was the only sound in the room. "I decide who is welcome here." Tessa looked at me for one long, poison-filled second. Then, without a word, she grabbed Graham by the arm, yanked him upright, and pushed him out the door. I watched them hurry down my path. I stepped over the threshold. I took the knob of my old, solid oak door. I closed it. Arthur, standing beside me, reached over and locked the deadbolt, my real deadbolt, the one Arthur had installed, the one the locksmith had failed to remove. The heavy, final click of the bolt sliding home was the most satisfying sound I have ever heard. Thank you for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and give it some extra support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.